presentation tonight. We will get right to the citizens' night, but I'm going to have Sean Lally, our CFO, do a mid-year summary, expenditure summary. At this time, it would be from January through June. So, if you would, sir.
Joe, can you put it up on the screens, please?
Let's.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, Manager Little, today's presentation is a tool to guide the governing body with decisions of budget appropriations for the upcoming budget season. The facts presented were derived from our 2014 CAFR, as well as estimated needs for fiscal 2016. Today's presentation we've broken down into three components: fixed expenditures or cost of doing business, escalating expenditures as our minimum municipal obligation in healthcare, and variable expenditures like road salt. The next slide will show a chart of the revenue versus expenditures for the fifth month end of the last 4 fiscal years. As you can see in the chart, in 2015, our revenues are at $20.8 million, our expenses are $9.15 million. The difference this year is $11.7 million, which is an increase of approximately $5 million over 2014 figures of $7.142 million. So we are moving in a positive direction. Business costs for 2015, this is a hard chart to see on the monitor, but what it is a summation of the list of bills, healthcare, and payroll for the periods of January 2015 to June of 2015, June 30th that is. And the total for all of those expenditures was $14.72 million so far this year, and we're at our halfway point. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule there, doing good. We have some significant annual expenditures or cost of doing business. Right up front, our healthcare costs average $1.345 million a year. Our debt service is $3.173 million. Emergency communications are $861,000. Public safety is $10.1 million. Public works is $6.4 million. Snow and ice removal was budgeted for $696,990 last year. Our minimum municipal obligation is $3.6 million. Totals $26.278 million for those particular items, which is approximately 83% of our annualized budget. Our payroll projections for 2016, holding all things constant, is $12.273 million, which does not reflect any increases or any other factors that I'm unaware of at this time. Now that some of the costs are known, how does this affect the municipality? The cost of doing business will have a direct correlation on our net position. One's ability to borrow, the method of funding necessary for critical infrastructure improvements or repairs, and the principle of incurring debt or paying as you go are all things that are affected by our expenditures. By increasing revenues and decreasing expenditures, one's net position increases. The Government Finance Officers Association states that the best practice is to have a fund reserve equal to or exceeding 20% of your general fund revenues. In our analysis, this would equate to $6.376 million. Currently, we have an unreserved fund balance of $5.141 million, which is 17% of our revenues, which is an increase over the last several years. Net position defined, what does that actually mean? In accounting terms, net position is the deferred inflow and outflow of resources and acts as the residual measure of government worth. The unrestricted portion of net position is what this discussion focuses on. That's basically our cash on hand. The next 3 slides will illustrate our net position in graphical form. Before I get to that, what the first chart illustrates is for the first time since 2005, our net position declined at a rate much less than historical numbers. And as an example, from 12 to 13, our net position decreased by 22.5%. The period from 13 to 14 also saw a decline, but it was only 0.3% This is attributable to the tax increase of 14 and fiscal prudence across all the departments. This chart represents our net position by component. This was copied directly out of our 2014 CAFR. As you can see, our total net position is $13.049 million, which is just a slight decrease, as stated earlier, of 0.75% from last year. But what's important is if you look under the unrestricted net position, from 13 we were at a negative 500,000. This year we're at a positive 340,000. So we are making strides in the right direction. The percentage changes in net position over the years, as you can see, we were up 47% from 2013 to 14. But if you look at some of the historical numbers, as from 2004 to 2005, you were down 23%. The biggest drop came from 11 to 12, where there was a 97% decline in net position.
What happened?
There was an expenditure for a park at that time, I believe, $6 million approximate dollars for the park. This graphic represents net position in illustrative form. You can see at $38 million in 2005 in net position overall, down to $13.049 million in 2015. The unreserved portion is the one in the center. That's the one that acts as our cash on hand. And you can see that it's minuscule in graphical form, but it went from a negative 500,000 to a positive 340,000. Financial highlights. Here's some strengths that we had in the municipality. We had the smallest decrease of fund balance since '07, as I've stated. It was a total decrease of $98,721, or 1% of funds. The net position climbed from negative 500 to a positive 340,000. Our bond rating has increased from an AA3 to an AA- with a stable outlook by Moody's rating agency. Our bond debt has decreased by $2.355 million, or 8.9% of our total expenditure budget. Unassigned fund balance was $5.141 million, or 17% of general fund revenues. Budget discussion. This is a graphic that is in front of you right now. That is our year-to-date expenditure summary. And it gives you an idea by pie chart of how much we spend on the different areas as of June 30th, 2015. As you can see, public safety and public works are the two biggest pieces of the pie year to date, followed by interest on long-term debt. As you can see, that interest is a lot of money annually. Areas with the greatest budgetary expense, this is a reiteration. You have general government, public safety, public works, highways, culture and recreation, conservation and development, and interest. All of those expenditures come to $29.383 million. And of course, with all budgets, there are some concerns that I have going into the 2016 season. One of the areas that does concern me is the police pension funding levels. The police pension plan net assets increased by $1.418 million, or a 3.71% increase, which lagged the benchmark by 3.29%, or basis points. The fund has a current funding ratio of 72%. What this means is that it has a direct effect on the amount of monies needed to meet our minimum municipal obligation. The higher the returns, the less MMO that we have to put in. The lower the returns, the more money that we as a municipality has to add to make the pension fund whole. OPEB, other post-employment benefits, has returned 5%, which has beat the benchmark by 0.09% since management has changed hands in October of 14. Total gains for the 6-month period have been $244,000. It should also be noted that Council's decision to create and fund an OPEB account puts Monroeville ahead of the pack and in the top 22% of municipalities within the state of Pennsylvania for funding OPEB. The MMO, minimum municipal obligation, in 2015, our annual contribution to employee pensions was $3,454,192, which represented 11% of our general fund. The anticipated rate for 16 has not been determined at this time, but there's nothing to lead us to believe that it is going to decrease. How the MMO liability is determined. One of the key factors in the determination of the MMO is the assumed rate of return and actuarial value of the assets held in trust. The next slide will show differences between not meeting, meeting, and exceeding the assumed rate of return. For every 1% decrease in assumed rate of return with the police pension fund as it currently stands, it costs the municipality $4.97 million in unfunded liability. Conversely, exceeding the assumed rate of return of 7% decreases our liability by $4.197 million. At present, the total liability of the police pension fund that is unfunded is $11.766 million. What is interesting about this slide, that the rate of decrease when you do not meet the actuarial assumption is greater than the rate of increase if you beat it. So that's something to think about. What I have here is a graphic chart that represents the current rate of return in the center, which is 7%, is the assumed for the police pension fund. A 1% decrease is a 6% rate of return. A 1% increase is an 8%. If you look at the bottom column, the unfunded liability with a 1% decrease under the actuarial assumption is $16.7 million would be the total liabilities. At the current level, it's what I stated, 11.766. If we increase returns by 1%, it would take the liability down from 11.766 to 7.569. Possible solutions to this problem: increase investment returns, which is kind of obvious, meet and preferably exceed the assumed rate of return, decrease managerial cost, and stay current through RFPs as to the most efficient manager in the marketplace, whoever that may be. Healthcare costs is another area that is concerning. In 2015, we were paying $1.345 million for medical insurance. It's estimated that we are going to receive a 20% increase, which translates to $260,000, thus taking our insurance premium to $1.6 million next year, if it is a 20% increase. Long-term planning, capital improvement plans. Capital improvement plans are developed to allow management and elected officials the opportunity to plan for, anticipate, and most importantly, fund improvements. These improvements range from building maintenance, stormwater management, vehicles, roads, and computers. The cost associated with said projects requires planning and long-term allocations of resources. Ideally, Monroeville anticipates putting $17.6 million into the capital improvement plan by the year 2021, and that's an ideal, perfect situation. KIP funding, standing for capital improvement plans. Two methods exist for funding capital improvement programs. Pay-as-you-go, as was discussed earlier in the presentation, is placing money as it becomes available into the program directly from the general fund. The benefit of doing so means that there is no long-term debt commitment and no interest payments on debt. The detriment is projects may take longer to fund, and as inflation and costs rise, you will not be able to keep pace. The money will have less value in the future than it does in the present. Issuing bonds is the second method of KIP funding, and that is simply incurring long-term debt with the intention of funding a project in its entirety with one allocation of revenue. The benefit of doing so is project cost is captured as today's dollars versus long-term decrease in money value. The detriment, the cost of borrowing, interest is carried for the life of the issuance, which incurs costs. Basically, that's called the cost of borrowing. Debt service versus the KIP. Monroeville's current debt liability is $24,085,000. In the year 2020, debt service payments will drop to $2.428 million as we pay down our debt from the level of currently of $3.177 million. This is a savings of $716,250 per year. In 2025, the debt service will drop to $597,000, or a drop of $2.57 million. This is represented graphically in the next slide. The monies that were formerly used to fund debt could be transferred to KIP funding, and sustainability of the municipality's infrastructure needs could be enhanced. This is a graphic representation which is hard to read on the monitors, but what is evident is the drop-off in the year 2024 of our debt obligation. And you can see also in the year 2020, the decrease from $3.1 million to $2.6 million in debt obligation. KIP, beginning in 2014, the municipality committed to transferring $1 million per year to the KIP fund from our general fund. Historically, the municipality has allocated more for capital improvements, roads, stormwater, vehicles, computers, etc. This revenue allocation should increase in the future to keep pace with infrastructure development and foster continued growth in the municipality. As indicated by the previous chart, the municipality will not see a substantial reduction in debt service until 2024. By that time, a significant amount of capital projects, fixed assets, will not be completed or purchased. The municipality needs to consider a dedicated revenue stream for capital improvements. Conclusion of everything that we've talked about, Monroeville has made great strides to advance our net position and increase our creditworthiness to rating agencies. Management is in tune and aware of the never-ending expenditures of the municipality. Council and management have used fiscal prudence in the development of budgets. More importantly, they have found some ways to reduce costs and thus hold their fiduciary responsibility to the highest standard. This ideology will be a cornerstone for future budgets and a policy that needs reviewed annually. Also, in today's competitive market environment, being sure that we purchase goods and services at the best possible price and cost-to-benefit ratio will be a critical step in advancing this municipality and its future and continued growth. And that's all I have for you tonight. Any questions?
Council? One of the things I did want to say with the cost of the health care, Sean, you were saying maybe 20% going into 16. We also had that 20% this year for 15 as well. So just to let residents know that we have to really try to group, that's one area we really have to get a hold of, beside the, the police pension and et cetera. Sure. Any other comments? Would it be possible to have this report on our website for residents to review as well? And if they would have any questions, Sean, would it be okay to refer them to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Great job, by the way.
Yeah, good job.